I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. I'm Brooke Lovelace with the Iowa Developmental Disabilities Council. Thanks for joining us for this dementia-friendly training that we're doing. Just a little housekeeping. We do have an interpreter that's hopefully pinned for folks. You can use closed captioning as well, too. If you hit the More button there on the bottom, the three little dots, you should be able to pick up closed captioning. We are recording this. We will send out the recording to everybody that's registered. And I believe there will be time for people to ask questions too. With that, I'm going to turn it over to one of our council members who is also with the Division of Aging and Disability Services out of Health and Human Services. She's going to do our introductions for us today. Thanks, Julie, for doing that. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brooke. And again, just welcome everyone and thanks for joining us on this Friday. This webinar, again, is I guess, hosted by the Iowa DD Council and Aging and Disability Services as a part of a project we are involved in called Bridging the Aging and Disability Networks. It is a learning collaborative from various states as we continue to grow and expand our networks. And certainly we thought that the topic of dementia is something that touches us all, personally, in our families or professionally, whatever the case may be. It is something that touches us all. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Megan Zimmerman from Northeast Iowa Area Agency on Aging, who is the dementia-friendly state coordinator in Iowa, to give us this Dementia Friends training today. So I'm going to turn it over to Megan.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you all for being here today. I have been looking forward to sharing this Dementia Friends program with this group, so thank you for being here. As Julie said, my name is Megan Zimmerman, and I work for the Northeast Iowa Area Agency on Aging on the Dementia Friendly Iowa program. And really, the goal of our program with Dementia Friendly Iowa is to build communities across the state where people living with dementia can live, age, and thrive. And so a big part of that is through education and making sure that we equip community members to serve those living with dementia and walk towards that individual with dementia instead of maybe not knowing what to do and feeling uncomfortable and walking away. And so, as Julie said, many of us know someone living with dementia, or we know someone that knows someone with dementia. And so I hope that you can take some of these things we talk about today and apply them to either your professional or personal life. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and we will get started. All right. So at this point, you should be able to see my screen. If not, someone let me know. So first and foremost, again, this is called the Dementia Friends program. So what is a dementia friend? Well, a dementia friend is anyone and everyone who attends sessions like this. So these Dementia Friends education sessions are happening all across the world. It's a global program, and it's been active here in Iowa since 2021. So the goal is to increase empathy and awareness surrounding dementia and decrease stigma surrounding dementia. And again, we do that through education, and anyone who attends this session or similar sessions can consider themselves a dementia friend. And yes, I see in the chat, are there slides which go along with these? There are slides. So yes, I can make sure that the facilitators have access to that as well to get those out.
Megan, are you able to send that to me right now and then I can send on to Mike?
Yeah, I can do that. I will go ahead and put it in the chat, like the direct link to it, if that works.
Perfect. That should work for you, wouldn't it, Mike?
Yep, that should do it.
Oh, perfect. Okay, that is the link to the slides. And then, in addition, this is a good place also to share, there is a supplemental guide or workbook, we call it, that goes along with our program today. So I'll also put in the chat the link to the session workbook so you can view that as well, and anyone can access that. You'll notice if you do open that session workbook, our slides have a page number at the bottom that corresponds with the page of the workbook as well. Okay, so back to Dementia Friends. We talked about what it is. Now let's talk about why is it important to be a dementia friend. So in Iowa, we know that at least 62,000 people are living with dementia, according to the Alzheimer's Association. Now I want to note here that this is a low number because it only includes people over 65 and those living with Alzheimer's type dementia. So there are likely many more individuals than just 62,000, but that's one of the best numbers we have. We also know that around 80% of those living with dementia live in the community as opposed to a nursing facility or long-term care. So whether we realize it or not, we are likely interacting with people living with dementia often, if not every day in our communities. People living with dementia are going to the grocery store, to the bank, to the faith-based communities in our neighborhoods. And again, we're interacting with those living with dementia all the time. So that is why we think it's so important to be a dementia friend and why we offer these to so many different groups, from children in elementary schools to people in senior centers and retirement communities and businesses and anywhere in between. Now, since we've partnered with the IDD network today to do this session, I threw in some different facts and applications for the IDD population. So estimates show, according to the Alzheimer's Association and various research out there, that Alzheimer's disease affects about 30% of people living with Down syndrome in their 50s, and then by their 60s, this number comes closer to 50% of those with Down syndrome are also living with Alzheimer's. There is still a lot of research that needs to be done, but it seems that those living with Down syndrome have a large presence of those plaques and tangle proteins that cause or are associated with Alzheimer's. So we're seeing a very high prevalence there. And a note, though, is that although, of course, the risk increases as people with Down syndrome age, at no point does it come close to reaching 100%. Again, it's about that 50%, which is still very, very significant in a large group of individuals. So after our session today, we hope that you all can describe dementia and talk about what the most common type is. We'll talk about the 5 key messages of Dementia Friends. We'll share some communication tips and talk about small actions you could consider taking as a dementia friend in your community, even if it's as small as changing the way you talk about dementia. And then we'll talk about available community resources across our state. Our session today has a couple videos and some activities. So we're at our first video, which is really a vision casting of what it means to be a dementia friend. And again, you'll see that anyone in the community across any sector can do their part to be a dementia friend.
If you saw someone living with dementia, would you recognize the signs? Would you be uncomfortable? Would you avoid them? Would you be frustrated? Would you do nothing? Or would you be a friend? Would you engage them and empower them to get through their day? Would you welcome the opportunity to help them feel like a part of your community? Would you take even the smallest step to make their world less frightening or confusing? Every single one of us has a unique part to play in the lives of people living with dementia in our community. Become a dementia friend today and build communities where all people can live, age, and thrive.
Hey, Mr. Fredrickson, it's Tuesday. Aren't you going to the store?
Yeah?
Come on, I'll walk with you.
So I love that video because it shows again how we can all play a role. I love at the end the neighbor who walks up and says, "It's Tuesday, aren't you going to the store? I'll walk with you." And what a simple act that was, but what a big difference that could have made in that the person with dementia's life. Maybe he was wandering off and just needed a little redirection and support. And without that education, my guess is that neighbor boy maybe wouldn't have walked up and offered that support. So again, that's kind of the vision of Dementia Friends. Okay, so we have our first kind of interactive portion. And so I'd like you to think right now when you hear or see the word dementia, what first comes to mind? Anyone want to share in the chat or speak up kind of what comes to mind when you think about dementia? Or maybe what do you know others in the community associate with the word dementia? Any thoughts?
This is Mike, and I would say that the first thing I think about is that it's not going to get any better.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I see in the chat, Lindsay says forgetful, Bambi says loss, forgetfulness, memory loss, seizure, says Roxanne. Yeah, well, thank you for all for participating in that. So on the next slide, I'm going to put some words on the screen that we hear a lot associated in our communities with dementia. And just because we have these on the screen does not mean I am endorsing these words. However, we hear things such as victim, hopeless, burden, devastating, wanderer, sufferer, sad. And you notice a theme here that a lot of these words are negative, right? And so all of these words out there being used to describe dementia and these ideas surrounding dementia are leading to negative stigma. And that stigma, unfortunately, affects those individuals with dementia and their families. Often we see people in the community who might get diagnosed and then don't want to talk about it. It's hush hush. They're worried people will treat them differently. Again, all examples of this negative stigma impacting individuals living with dementia. So part of our goal with Dementia Friends is to, through education, reduce that stigma and help people understand that although it is difficult sometimes in that journey with dementia, there's still a lot of life. For someone with dementia, quality of life is absolutely possible, and a lot of amazing positive things about individuals living with dementia. Let's describe what dementia is. I've been saying that word quite a bit already, so I want to make sure we define it for everyone. So when I'm saying dementia, I am talking about a set of symptoms. Symptoms might include memory loss, confusion with time and place, changes in sleep patterns, social changes, seizures, hallucinations, changes in gait or the way someone walks. So these are all grouped under this term of dementia. Now, dementia, the symptoms have a cause behind them. So oftentimes it's a disease, and the most common form or cause of dementia symptoms is Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease causes about 60 to 80% of cases of dementia, so it's very common. However, that means 20 to 40% of those with dementia have a different form or cause. Some of those forms include dementia with Lewy bodies, frontal temporal degeneration, vascular dementia, and many, many others. So the big takeaway here is that not everyone with dementia has Alzheimer's. There are many other forms that may be causing those symptoms. And although they are very similar, there are some different characteristics between the different forms. For example, someone with Lewy body dementia is a lot more likely to experience hallucinations versus someone that has Alzheimer's, for example. Okay, next I want to share some differences between typical aging and dementia. And these are on page 3 of your workbook if you're following along in that way. So first we have memory loss is definitely a common symptom of dementia. It's what most of us think of, and it's memory loss that disrupts daily functioning. Now, someone who's typically aging may walk out into the parking lot of a grocery store and forget where they parked their car. And that happens to all of us sometimes. But someone with dementia who's experiencing dementia symptoms may walk out and forget how they got to the store, or they may forget what their car looks like, or they might get into their car and forget how to use their seatbelt or start the car. So it's a different level of memory loss. We also see with dementia challenges with planning and solving problems. Things like following sequential steps, such as a recipe or planning ahead for certain days or events, might become more difficult. Next, we have difficulty with familiar tasks. Things like driving could become more difficult. Maybe someone always plays a certain game, such as bridge or a different card game, and they start to forget how to do that familiar task. We also see confusion with time and place as a symptom of dementia. It could be someone showing up at the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe they show up at their hair salon and they meant to go to their dentist office, or they show up to their chiropractor appointment on Tuesday morning instead of Friday afternoon. We also see individuals with dementia sometimes wearing clothing that's not correct for the season. Maybe they're putting on shorts in the winter time or a coat in the summertime. I knew someone with dementia who, no matter what time of year it was, always said Merry Christmas, and that showed that confusion of time in the season. We also see changes and challenges with visual and spatial perception as a sign of dementia. This is not necessarily because their eyes are changing, but it's because their brain is having a difficult time interpreting what their eyes are taking in. So for those of us who have two healthy eyes, what happens is our eyes take in the image, and our brain puts the image on top of each other and tells us what we're seeing. Now that starts to be impacted by dementia. So things might get a little blurrier, the ability to judge distances might be changed, or maybe they see something and they're looking at a picture on the wall, for example, and their brain doesn't tell them it's a picture, but their brain tells them whatever's on the wall is real life. And so we can definitely see some of those challenges. With the changes in visual and spatial perception, does anyone have an idea or want to take a guess as to why this person in the image has been vacuuming for 5 to 10 times in the last 20 minutes? Maybe they keep vacuuming, keep vacuuming. Any ideas based on the changes in visual perception? Any thoughts? See in the chat. The floor still looks dirty, says Mike. Christy says they have forgotten or have reread their notes. Yeah, so I think both of those could definitely be true. Given those visual and spatial changes, they may see these lines, the pattern in the rug, and think it's dirt. And so they may keep vacuuming that up. In addition, they may have forgotten they've already done it. That could certainly be another reason. But I think it can be surprising to people to find out that the perception of senses, not only vision, but all 5 of our senses can be impacted by dementia. Next, with dementia, we have new problems with speech and writing. The person may have a difficult time jumping into a conversation or trail off mid-sentence, or maybe have difficulty with word finding. They may make up words like hand clock instead of a wristwatch in this image. I had a friend with dementia who said ear muffins instead of ear muffs. So again, we see those challenges with speech and writing. We also see misplacing items and difficulty retracing steps as a sign of dementia. You may have heard of things such as a cell phone in the fridge or milk in the cupboard. My aunt recently stayed at a vacation rental home, and she kept finding things in weird places. She found the toilet brush in the kitchen cabinet. She found shoes shoved between the bed. And so she ended up calling the owners and found out that someone with dementia had stayed there before her. And so again, that's that example of difficulty putting things in the right place and misplacing items. We also see poor judgment as a sign of dementia. Could be falling into financial scams, or poor judgment with hygiene, poor judgment with saying things or doing things that are maybe not appropriate for the social situation. We see social withdrawal and social changes as a sign of dementia. Oftentimes, people start to withdraw from their friendships and relationships because it could be that negative stigma we talked about. They're embarrassed to show their signs or being treated differently. Or perhaps they just can't quite keep up with the social events anymore. They forget when they made plans, or maybe they always watch basketball on TV with their friends and it's really hard for them to keep up with the game. So different reasons for that withdrawal. Then finally, the 10th sign that we'll discuss in depth is changes in mood and personality. Our brain controls everything about us, really. It's our emotions, our feelings. And so as someone's brain is impacted, they may become more irritable, less social. Just mood and personality can change, definitely, with dementia. So those are the top 10 most common signs that we see with dementia, and on page 3 of your workbook, compared to typical aging. Now, because of this group, I wanted to talk about common changes for persons with intellectual disabilities, because there might be some differences between what we typically see with dementia. So some of those on the screen I'll touch on. We might see reduced interest in being sociable or conversing or expressing thoughts could be a sign of dementia in people with IDD. It could also show up as just sadness, fearfulness, anxiety, irritability. Someone brought up in the chat earlier seizures that begin in adulthood. Seizures are not necessarily a sign of dementia for those that do not have intellectual and developmental disabilities, but for those that do, seizures is a potential sign of dementia. A recommendation from the Alzheimer's Association for earlier detection for those living with intellectual and developmental disabilities would be to document baseline functions by age 35 and continue to evaluate those to look for the change over time. And that's true for anyone. Dementia symptoms, you'll see a progression, a change over time. And so it's really important to note those. Okay. Now we have our 5 key messages. These are our key messages that are discussed in any Dementia Friend session across the globe. So our first, and we've already discussed a few of these, our first is that dementia is not a typical part of the aging process. So if you notice signs in yourself, someone else, the best first step would be to talk to a primary care provider and start that diagnosis process, because the signs could be dementia or it could be something else. Next, our key message is dementia is caused by diseases of the brain, Alzheimer's being the most common. Our third key message is that dementia is not just about memory problems. A lot of people in the community think dementia equals memory loss, but not everyone with dementia actually will experience memory loss. Certain forms don't always have memory loss, surprisingly, but obviously we already talked about many other symptoms that are grouped within this term of dementia. Fourth, it is possible to have a good quality of life with dementia, especially with the right support. And finally, there's more to the person than the dementia. This one I'm really passionate about. That's why I've been using person first language, saying person living with dementia. They're person first, right? And dementia is a part of their life. They may have to adapt things over time, but they still continue to live with dementia. Sometimes people can live up to 20 years plus with dementia. All right. Next is our bookcase story, and this is also written on page 5 of your workbook, but it's basically an analogy to picture what's happening in the brain with dementia. So, if you can imagine, the brain is represented by a bookcase, and every book stored on each shelf is something we store in our brain. So one book might be our favorite recipes. One book might be what we ate for breakfast this morning. Another book might be memories of our favorite days, like our wedding day or whatever, graduation, whatever it may be. Another book might be how to get home from the grocery store. You know, you get the picture. Every book represents something in our brain. Now, if you can picture that the books on the top shelf represent facts, complex thinking, short-term memories, whereas the books on the bottom shelves represent things like emotional memories, long-term memories, feelings, emotions, values. And as dementia comes and rocks that shelf, the books on the top shelves will be falling off more quickly. So those facts, complex thinking skills, short-term memories may fall away more quickly than the books on the bottom shelves. Those emotions, feelings, deeply rooted values, long-term emotional memories. And that's based on where those things are stored in the brain and how dementia progresses through the brain. So the great takeaway here is that even if someone with dementia might not remember who we are, maybe we go visit them and they don't remember our name, and 5 minutes later they've forgotten that we visited, we can still connect to those bottom bookshelves. We can still make that person feel joy in the moment, and really make them feel happy, even if they've forgotten 5 minutes later that we visited. We can connect to that bottom bookshelf, which I think is pretty awesome. So then on page 6 of your workbook, there is an image of a healthy brain on the left and a brain with advanced Alzheimer's on the right. And as you can see, that brain with Alzheimer's has some significant change. There are spots that are deteriorated, some darker areas, holes. And we show this not to scare anyone, but to build empathy, because we want people to realize that the person with dementia cannot control what is happening to their brain. They're not choosing to have those symptoms. It's change in physical changes in their brain. And this is Alzheimer's in particular, but any brain with other forms of dementia will have physical changes happening. So we have a picture of an orange because the brain with Alzheimer's on average will lose about the same amount of weight as an orange, which is definitely significant. So again, we show this to build empathy and help us have a little more patience when we're with people living with dementia. So then on page 6 of your workbook, there is an everyday task activity that I'd encourage you to think about either now or sometime today. It basically asks you to pick a task that you do every day, or maybe that you ask your clients or family members to do. I'll use the example of brushing our teeth. So when we think about brushing our teeth, I want you to break down all of the steps involved in that. So brushing our teeth may feel like a simple task for some of us, but when we start to break it down, we first have to remember to brush our teeth. Then we have to find the bathroom, open the door, locate the toothbrush, the toothpaste. Maybe that requires opening a drawer, closing the drawer, grabbing the toothbrush, turning on the faucet of the sink, putting the toothbrush under, turning off the sink. And I could go on and on. That's really only about half of the steps involved. So if we think about breaking activities into steps, we might realize that any one of those steps could become difficult for someone with dementia and kind of derail that activity. And then we wonder why someone with dementia might leave the sink on. They leave the sink running after they brush their teeth. Again, it's because of the changes happening in their brain. So I encourage you to think about that and think, how could you support someone with dementia as they might be struggling with even simple tasks in their everyday lives. Next, on page 7 of your workbook, we are going to start talking about communication tips. So what can we do to set the person with dementia up for success when we're communicating with them? Because communication does not end even if a person is no longer able to speak. Obviously, communication is so much more than that, and everyone deserves and needs to be communicated with well. So our first puzzle piece is to treat that person with dignity and respect, the same that we would with anyone else. And I know that everyone on this call wants to do that. That's probably why you're here, right? And so there are small things we can do to ensure that we're affirming that dignity. It could be as simple as including that person in conversation with eye contact instead of just talking to that family member or caregiver. I've heard a lot of people with dementia share with me that they go to the doctor, for example, and it's their appointment, but the doctor asks all the questions to that caregiver. So that's one way we can show them respect, is to include the person in conversation. The next puzzle piece is to be aware of feelings, not only the person's, of course, but also our own. Maybe we're working with someone and they've asked us the same question 10 times in the last 2 hours, and we are getting frustrated. And that happens. But my encouragement to you would be to, even if you might feel frustrated inside, try to remember their brain is changing, but also try to make sure that we're still coming off as happy, as pleasant, as calm. Things like tone of voice, facial expressions, body language. Those are all things we can do to make sure we're not showing our frustration. What we know is that when anxiety goes up in a person, cognition goes down. And so if we have made that person with dementia feel anxious because we're frustrated, whatever we're asking them to do is just going to be even more difficult for them because we've caused them to be anxious. So it's important to be aware of our feelings. Be patient is the next puzzle piece. It can take someone with dementia 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds sometimes to take in what we've said and then respond. So I want to kind of show you a demo here of what not to do. Maybe you're visiting a friend with dementia and you walk in and say, "Hey Jean, how's it going? How's your day been? It is so beautiful outside. It's so good to see you." Now that's something we might say on a daily basis, but if you think about it, we just said 4 different things in a matter of 10 seconds. So Jean, with dementia, might still be trying to process our presence and just saying hi, and we've already tried to ask her 2 questions. And so it's very important to say one phrase or question at a time and wait for a response. Yeah, so slowing down is very helpful. The next puzzle piece is to connect instead of correct. This is super, super important. If you take one thing away from this communication section, it would be this one. When someone's living with dementia, they may have a different reality than we have. They may think they're living in the 1980s, and we know it's 2025, but to them, they're living in the 80s. So just remember that their reality is just as real to them as ours is to us. we can't pull them back into our reality, and it really doesn't do much good. So it's better to connect instead of correct. When we try to correct, it might cause distrust. It might make them frustrated. They might start to realize that they've forgotten or are thinking the wrong thing, and they might feel really embarrassed about that. And then 10 minutes later, 2 hours later, the next day, they might forget you even corrected them and say the same thing again. So it's just best to connect. For example, someone with dementia, maybe they have moved and they have an apartment now, and they used to have a dog, Sparky, in their home 10 years ago. And maybe they say, "Where's Sparky? Have you seen Sparky?" Now, instead of correcting and saying, "Sparky's dead," it's best to connect. So I might respond to that and say, "I haven't seen Sparky, but I'll keep an eye out." Or maybe I say, "You know, I wonder if Sparky's taking a nap. We'll have to look for her later." Or we might say, "Sparky's at the groomer." Or if I really don't know what to say, I sometimes use the phrase, "tell me more." So they say, "Have you seen Sparky?" I might say, "I'm not sure, but tell me more about Sparky." Because maybe they just want to talk about Sparky. Or maybe I say, "Is there a reason you're looking for Sparky?" And they say, "I just want to make sure that Sparky has food." And then I can respond, "Oh, I'll take care of it." And then we move on. But again, it's best not to correct. It's always better to connect and then redirect if necessary. And then finally, the last puzzle piece on the screen is to offer a guess or ask for a nonverbal. So if someone with dementia can't quite come up with the right word, we can give them a moment and offer a guess of the word, or maybe we can ask them to show us or to point. Oftentimes, people living with dementia start to lose the ability to verbally communicate, but nonverbal communication is easier for them to both give and to understand. On page 8 of your workbook, there are some do's and don'ts in conversation. I really like this section because it shows just some simple ways we can rephrase what we're saying to set that person up for success. So let's go through a few. Instead of saying a command, such as "you need to go through the checkout now," they might just need a little reminder. So instead of a command, provide a cue. The checkout is right over here. They probably don't mean to be stealing the groceries, right? And they don't need to be told a command, but they just need that reminder, that cue. Next, instead of vague statements, so "come over, it's ready," avoid saying "it" and just be specific. "Please come here, your coffee is ready." Don't make their brain have to spend energy figuring out what your vague statement means. Next, instead of negative statements, maybe a person is in your office and they're trying to get through to a room that they're not supposed to. They're getting into the supply closet or something. Instead of saying "don't go there," change it to a positive or neutral. So "let's go here," or "is there something I can help you with?" Most of us don't like to be told no, and people with dementia don't like that either usually, especially if they can't reason why it's a no. And then finally, avoid quizzing or putting them on the spot. So we really want to avoid questions like, "Do you remember when?" Instead, if we want to reminisce, you could say, "I remember when." And don't expect them to remember. They may not remember. It's really hard for families with loved ones to not say, "Mom, do you remember me?" Because sometimes we really want to gauge where that person's at, but we really don't want to put them in that situation. Because if they don't remember, they might feel really bad about it, or they might make up and just say, "Oh yeah, of course," right? Because they've learned to kind of get by just going along with it. So we never want to put that person on the spot or quiz them. Okay, we have a couple more slides here. This is our last video today, and this is Kevin Dill. Kevin is living with Lewy body dementia, and he lives right here in Iowa. He's been a partner and a volunteer for our program since we got started in 2019, and he was part of that initial action team in Waterloo that kind of got dementia-friendly efforts going in Iowa. And he's been gracious enough to share his story in most of our Dementia Friend sessions. So I'll let him talk about why it's so important to be a dementia friend and a little bit about what it's like to actually live with dementia.
Okay, so my name is Kevin Dill, and I am 55 years old, right? And I have dementia with Lewy bodies. Because even though you look at me and I look okay, I'm not okay, and when I'm out, I don't like to sit. I like to move and walk and go. You may see me and think, well, that guy's strange, or what's wrong with him, or do I go up and talk to him because he seems weird? I'm not weird. I'm actually a very nice, kind person. So you just never know if somebody is struggling with dementia or Alzheimer's or cognitive issues that might need your help, because it can get kind of scary. Things don't seem right. You seem lost. You don't recognize things. Sometimes, for me anyway, sometimes I can just start crying for no reason. And I know that can probably be weird to people who see me standing there just crying and don't know why. So just, it doesn't just affect the elderly, since I'm in my 50s. So you just never know. Just treat me like you always treated me. I'm still Kevin. I'm still the same guy. Still the same guy with the big heart, the kind man, who cares more about your needs than my own needs. I'm still him. I just struggle at times. So we talked about this, just a little grace, a little kindness, a little patience, and we'll get there. I've learned to just tell people now that this is what I have, so I'm going to apologize to you now, but I may need your help if you're willing to help. If you're not willing to help, can you find somebody that will help? Because I may need that help, because it can get scary. It's difficult. There's just too many people, too many choices. You really don't really understand food anymore. I don't always get the concept anymore. So I don't know what I'm supposed to get or what I'm supposed to eat. I know it probably drives my family crazy because they'll ask and I have no idea what to say. It's hard. It's weird. I just don't understand food anymore. What I'm supposed to eat, what I'm not supposed to eat, when I'm supposed to eat. Why do I have to eat? What does it matter? So it's just too many people, too much lighting. It's confusing. There's too many things to pick. So it's a frustrating process, and it's a scary process. And people aren't nice at the grocery store. They just want to get in and go, and they not very thoughtful or kind. They're just pushing you around, and getting what they want, and don't really care what's happening to you or that you're struggling. I don't like the grocery store. I hate the grocery store. It's a difficult process.
So that's our video with Kevin. We have several other videos of Kevin and other people living with dementia here in Iowa on our YouTube channel if you are interested in watching more of those, because I do think that learning about dementia from people who are living with dementia is one of the best ways to learn about it. So we're really thankful for Kevin sharing this story today. So as we're starting to wrap up here, my encouragement to all of you is to turn your understanding of dementia into action. Part of Dementia Friends is helping people understand there are just small things you can do to help build dementia-friendly communities across our state. So it might be changing the way you talk about it. So saying living with dementia instead of suffering with dementia. Maybe you're just wanting to share information that you learned today with someone who might benefit. Maybe you're going to get in touch with someone with dementia that you know who might just need a little extra support, or another friend. Anything else, really, it all makes such a big difference. And then another kind of step that people often ask about in our sessions is how to keep their brain healthy. So we don't have time to dive super deep into this, but there are research-backed things that we can do to keep our brain healthier, potentially for longer. I do want to note here that these are just some activities that have the potential to keep our brain healthy, but not all. Dementia is not completely preventable. These just may reduce the risk. It's never someone's fault if they develop dementia. We never want someone to look at this list and say, oh, I have dementia. I must not have done good enough with this, because that's certainly not the case. Dementia has a lot of ties to genetics as well, but these are just some things that we can consider because there is no cure for dementia at this point. So things like continuing lifelong learning. That doesn't have to mean, going to a university. It could just be keeping up on things we like to learn about and joining on things like this and keep learning and challenging our brain. It's important to monitor and treat any hearing or vision loss, protect our head from brain injuries like wearing a helmet. I have a lot of friends who make fun of me for wearing my bike helmet, but it's very important to keep our brain safe and healthy. You can also work to keep your heart healthy. So things that are good for our heart are typically good for our brain. Vascular dementia is caused by a lack of blood flow to the brain and oxygen over time. So if we can keep our heart pumping healthy, that helps our brain stay healthy. Things like limiting alcohol consumption, quitting the use of tobacco, attaining and maintaining a healthy body weight, all things that we can do to potentially reduce our risk of dementia. And I won't read through all of these, but lastly, I want to highlight building friendships and staying socially connected. Social isolation can be a big risk factor for dementia, so it's very important to stay connected. As far as resources, there are resources available and supports here in Iowa, and they are listed on the back page of your workbook. The Alzheimer's Association is wonderful. They have an 800 number that's open 24/7 to answer any questions from families to people with dementia to professionals. I'm part of the Area Agency on Aging Network, and we cover all of the counties across Iowa. We are actually piloting a dementia service specialist position here at the Northeast Iowa Area Agency on Aging, and he's ready to go and excited to do care consultations and answer any dementia-related questions in the Northeast Iowa region. But even in the other AAAs, there are aging specialists available who can help navigate resources and everything like that. So those are great resources as well. And then we do have a dementia resource guide on our website, which we created with topic by topic information, answering questions like, what do you do if someone is maybe no longer safe to drive, or how to get a diagnosis? So some of those topical questions, and that's on our website. So just a couple more slides here, but as I'm finishing up, I do want to drop a link in the chat if you're willing to fill out an evaluation of our program today. It really helps us continue to improve what we're offering and get feedback. So if you'd be willing to click on that link or scan that QR code and just take a couple minutes to fill that out, either now or later today with your feedback, that would be appreciated. So now you all are considered dementia friends. So congratulations, you're a dementia friend. So thank you for joining our global movement and the 15,000 people plus in Iowa who have also become dementia friends. I always want to put the plug in if anybody's interested in becoming a champion presenter, so someone who can go out and do this program in your community. I'm always looking for more champions. So you're welcome to go to our website or contact me, and I'd be happy to talk to you about what that looks like. It's just a 2-hour training, and we'd equip you to do this program in your community. We also do have a dementia-friendly business training. So if any of you are with businesses, organizations that feel you would benefit from a session similar to this, but we do adapt it to certain settings, we would love to do that. For businesses or organizations that have at least half of their staff, we can recognize them with a certificate and a window sticker. So this is a hardware store that did it in Northeast Iowa, but we really can do this with any type of organization. So with that, thank you so much for listening in today, and I'd love to open it up for questions if there are any.
Mike, go ahead.
Well, I have a question and a suggestion.
Okay.
So my question, and maybe I should start just with the question, and well, I think I could do these well. So my question, dementia related question, is I have a really close friend whose wife has dementia, and they just came to stay with me for 3 months or 3 weeks this winter. So I got to observe a lot of what has gone on. And one of the things that he often does do is say, I'll use a different name. I'll say Bonnie, which is he'll say, Bonnie, when did you go to high school, or where did you graduate, or what did we do yesterday? And of course, she isn't able to respond, and it gets her frustrated, and then they argue. And I'm sure it's become sort of a family dynamic thing, but it just makes me, really sick to see him do that to her. And, I feel like as a friend, I'm kind of treading on light territory because I don't want to get into the middle of their family dynamics, but I just want to figure out a way to tell them to knock it off.
Mhm. Yeah, that is really tough, Mike. And I think that we see that a lot because, like your friend may not have bad intentions. He might just not realize that it's not helpful to kind of put her on the spot. And sometimes we see families, like I think I mentioned, who want to kind of quiz their loved one to see where they're at in the progression. So they say, "Hey, do you remember this?" And they're really hopeful that their loved one will remember. And it's more for their sake than for the good of that individual with dementia. And so, yeah, that can be really hard. And I don't have a great answer, the whole situation, but even maybe, I don't know if you're in a spot you can share the session workbook or point them, to attend a
Yeah.
session, but it is really hard and to see that happen for sure.
Well, thanks. It's great content. Just a real quick suggestion, or offer to follow up. I am blind and I use a screen reader, and because of some of the images and so forth, and it was a bit of a challenge to navigate through the slides, and part of it may have been because of the Google interface. But I would be very happy, because there may be blind caregivers or whomever in the future that may want to access this. And if you're interested in following up, and Julie, you know how to
Yep.
find me. So I would be happy to kind of walk you through that at some point, or
Okay.
whomever is.
That would be great, Mike. I would love help with that. So I appreciate that. And yeah, Julie, if you're willing to connect us, I'd
Sure.
be great.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Mike.
No, it's a learning process.
For
You know,
sure. Thank
that's-
you.
Megan, just in the chat, Chris is just talking about kind of that addressing self-care of the caregiver, right? That caregiver that's with that person, many hours of the day, and that self-care and respite and stuff that they need as well. So certainly
Yeah.
that's part of the package, right?
Absolutely. That is super important. And kind of back to Mike's example, it's really hard for the caregiver. And a lot of people, don't have the education and their loved ones diagnosed and they maybe don't even know what dementia means, and so there's a lot, caregivers go through a lot, but there is support out there. Those resources on the back of that session workbook, the area agencies on aging have some caregiver programs that could potentially assist with finding respite care and things like that, because it's very important for um, and easier said than done for caregivers to take care of themselves, but it's definitely a difficult role for many.
Mhm.
Thanks for that, Chris.
Yeah. I've been fortunate. I've taken this training several times and always take away just really great nuggets. Megan, we kind of talked about becoming a dementia champion, but if folks on the call are like, oh, this would be a great presentation to have at my, church group up in Osage or wherever.
Yeah,
Can you talk a little bit about kind of the network that there are
yeah.
dementia friends across the state?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Julie. So we do have champions across the state that really we pretty much have coverage in every county, and if we don't, we can usually have someone offer it virtually or get there if we can. So, yeah, wherever you're at in Iowa, if you're interested in hosting a session like this, I'm putting my direct email address in the chat if you want to reach out to me directly, or there's information on our website on next steps as well. But I'd love to chat with you if you're interested in doing something like this with your group or organization or becoming a champion. So yeah, thanks, Julie. We're really thankful for such a great network of champions and partner organizations as well. So yeah. Anything else?
Well, thanks, Megan, so much for doing this for us. I mean, this almost seems like something I think our council may want to host once a year, just to make sure we keep getting the information out to people. So
Yeah,
I don't think this will be
absolutely.
the last time we want to offer this because it is such great information.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed being here today.
Guess we get everybody back a minute of their time.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
A whole minute.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Thanks for
Thanks
joining
all.
us.
Thank you.